Welcome to the Saturday Slam and Jam. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. With me, as always, is my good friend, Alex Speers. Today on the show, we are going to go through some headlines. We're going to talk Rookie of the Year. We are also going to go through our favorite things. And then at the tail end of the show, we're going to have our buddy Bryce Simon come on to discuss the Detroit Pistons and, of course, do some ridiculous trivia. That is very fun. Very much looking forward to that. But before we get to any of the trivia, any of the chaos, Alex, tell me about the top stories in the NBA this week.
Well, Andrew, the top story this week was our first 50-point game of the season. In a game against Indiana, Paolo Banchero bullied the Pacers, getting to the line 22 times en route to a 50-13-9 line. Paolo's 37 points in the first half tied a franchise record for most points in a half, previously set by Tracy McGrady. Through 5 games, Banchero is averaging 29 points per game for the 3-2 Magic. Unfortunately, later in the week, we would find out that Paolo had a torn right oblique that will keep him out for the next 4 to 6 weeks, a significant blow for the young Magic team. Paolo, who averaged 4.4 three-point attempts per game last season, took 9 three-pointers in that 50-point game. Another data point in what has been an historical start to the NBA season from 3. Currently, NBA teams are taking more than 40% of their shots from 3, the highest attempt rate ever. Yep. Owen Phillips noted in his blog, The F5, the rise in three-point attempts is largely coming from an increase in pull-up attempts from behind the arc. Take Anthony Edwards, for example. Kevin O'Connor pointed out that Ant is taking 58.9% of his shots from 3, a rate that is higher than any James Harden season. And that includes Ant taking nearly 9 pull-up threes per game. Yikes. The Bulls, the freaking Bulls, who used to be allergic to threes during the DeRozan era, tied a franchise record this week for made three-pointers in a game with 25. When will this madness stop, Andrew? I can remember watching Monte Ellis go out there and shoot 36% on 8 mid-range attempts per game, and I liked it, Andrew. I liked that. I thought that was good.
I liked it.
I would yell at my TV. I say, give it to the Mississippi Bullet and let him try some stuff. Now, I'm watching these losers step back a couple feet and shoot the same percentage as Monte, and I'm barfing my guts out, Andrew. And speaking of barf, the Nuggets had one of the more bad good weeks I've ever seen. They ended up going 2-1 on the week. Solid result. The 2 wins both required overtime and were against 2 teams, the Raptors and the Nets, who are expected to be in the lottery this season. And of note, in the Raptors game, Scotty Barnes sustained an orbital fracture. He's going to be sidelined for at least 3 weeks. Now, for the Nuggets, they continue to be carried by Nikola Jokic. He's averaging 31, 12, and 9 on 57, 55, 78 shooting. Now, it's only 4 games. This will change. But as of right now, per Cleaning the Glass, Jokic's on-off number is plus 38.9. Now, for reference, his previous high for a season was plus 24.8. Jokic may be as good as ever, but Denver's bench may be as bad as ever. Dario Saric, one of Calvin Booth's top targets this summer. He said it was one of his top targets. We gotta get this guy. We have to land Dario Saric. He played 39 minutes this season so far. The Nuggets have been outscored in those minutes by 30 points. Well, at least the good news for Nuggets fans is, Calvin Booth didn't give Dario Saric a player option for next season. What's that now? Yeah.
Breaking news?
Yeah, that's a rough one. It does distract me a little bit from the Zeke Naji contract, so maybe that was part of the idea.
You know what this is? This is an MVP rope-a-dope is what this is.
It is.
He knew what he was doing. He is decreasing the bench level to increase this number so that we can throw it around and get Jokic another MVP. That's all this is, everybody. Everybody's... We call this the Samaj Christian tactic. Yes.
It was used very successfully in 2017 when Russ won the MVP. Well, another former champ who isn't looking too hot is the Milwaukee Bucks, who have now lost 4 in a row. They sit at 1-4, tied with our Detroit Pistons. Now, some of those losses, understandable, a competitive loss at Boston, but the Bucks have also dropped games against Chicago and Brooklyn, 2 teams you would expect them to beat. Per Cleaning the Glass, the Bucks currently have the 23rd ranked offense and 26th ranked defense. Chris Middleton remains out, and the upcoming schedule doesn't do them any favors, as their next 2 games are against the 5-0 Cavaliers, one of two remaining undefeated teams in the league, along with the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Cavs' last two wins included an impressive win at MSG over the Knicks and a complete blowout of the Lakers in Cleveland. The Thunder continued their winning streak with a home win over the Spurs, a marquee matchup for the brewing Chet-Wemby rivalry that got an extra boost this week when ESPN analyst Michael C. Wright said that Wemby, quote, will not even say the man's name, referring to Chet. That sounds more than a rivalry. Now, maybe he should try saying his name, because whatever he did do to prepare for the Thunder game did not work, as Wemby was held to a career-low 6 points in the loss. But don't feel too bad for him, because in the very next game against the Utah Jazz, Wemby recorded the second 5x5 of his career, putting up 25, 9, and 7 with 5 steals, 5 blocks, and just for fun, 4 threes, the most three-pointers ever recorded in a 5x5 game. He was 1 3 away from a 5x6, Andrew. We've never even seen that. He became only the third player in NBA history, along with Hakeem and Andrei Kirilenko, to have multiple 5x5 games in his career, and he did it by year 2. Another crazy stat from that game is that the Spurs were a plus 43 in Wemby's minutes and a minus 26 when he was off the court. Finally, this week, we say farewell to a hooper. Rudy Gay announced his retirement from the NBA. This week, Rudy played 17 seasons in the NBA, accumulating over 17,000 points in his career. I'll remember Rudy mostly from his early Memphis days, where he was averaging 20 points per game by his second season. And early on in his career, he felt like one of those guys who was always just about to fully break out and make the leap to all-star status. It never really happened, but he still had a great career as a high-flying wing scorer, and he retires as the 5th leading scorer in Grizzlies franchise history. So from all of us at Slam and Jam, all of us, me and Andrew, we wish the great Rudini a wonderful retirement. And those are the top stories this week, Andrew.
What great stories we have in the NBA every single week. Now let's go to the BetMGM line of the week, brought to you by BetMGM. We're looking at the Rookie of the Year odds. Currently, the number one pick, believe it or not, has the best odds to win Rookie of the Year at plus 450 with Lakers rookie Dalton Knecht. There had to be a Lakers rookie sneaking in here. Dalton Knecht has had a nice start to his season so far. Zach Edey has fallen to third best odds at plus 550. Stephon Castle plus 750. Yves Missi plus 900. Alex Sarr next, and then Bub Carrington at plus 1,400, and then everybody else's odds are pretty much a long shot. But these have already changed quite a bit from where the preseason odds were, with Reed Shepherd second. Don't really see his name here. He's not really getting a lot of burn just because there's so many guys in Houston. Risa Shea was third. Matas Buzelis, who's not playing a lot, was plus 900 to start the season. This is going to be interesting because I don't think this is going to be anywhere close to what the order is going to be in like 2 months. You know, what we see here today, I think it's going to change a lot.
It feels even more different from like the Malcolm Brogdon year, because at least that year you did have Embiid, who I think he only played like 31 games, but super productive in those games. I saw Tom Haberstroh had a tweet earlier this week that no rookies had scored 15 points yet. And then the very next night, we did get 3 on the same night. So Dalton Knecht, Bub Carrington, and Reese Shea have all scored over 15 points. But it's only those 3, and the high score so far has been Dalton Knecht with 18 points in a game. So yeah, it's a really interesting year. I think I would still favor Reese Shea, but this is such a weird year that even looking at someone like Ryan Dunn, a player who traditionally would never... that type of player would never be considered for Rookie of the Year. The impact he's already having on a team that, is 4-1, playing really well. Who knows? Like, I went on last night just to see if his odds changed, and they had jumped from plus 2,000 to plus 1,500 already. Yeah. So, yeah, it's going to be a really fascinating Rookie of the Year race. I think I would still stick with Reese Shea, who is number 1 now. But you could see any of these guys having like a hot month and a half and just shooting to the top and just being able to win the award based on that alone. Because it doesn't feel like there's just going to be someone who's going to be dominant the entire year.
Yeah, it's just like, the whole league is just like, all right, somebody do something. If you can do something, you can win this award, which is just, it's really interesting. I think Bub Carrington has got a really good chance. He's plus 1,400 right now on BetMGM. And I think he's going to get the possessions. I think as the year goes on, that they're going to continue to hand him a lot of possessions. And that's what you need. And he's been pretty efficient so far, and is like one of the only guys averaging double digits in this Rookie of the Year race. So I lean Bub. I'm leaning Bub. And I think some of that is just like somebody's got to score the points on a bad team. And I think Bub's up to the task.
All right, Andrew, it's time for our favorites of the week segment where we look back and we talk about all the favorite things that happened this week that we just loved and we just want to tell you about them. And let's start with our favorite quote this week. Andrew, what was your favorite quote this week?
Continuing to talk about the rookies, and one of the most fun names to say, Zachary Risache, had a quote that was here on The Athletic, so that back in France, I was super athletic, and now I'm just a regular dude, which is just, it's funny because I mean, that is certainly true amongst like any rookie coming into the NBA. But I saw Risache play in person. He looks really good. He's got really good size. Athletically, yes, like he's not like a crazy athlete compared to a lot of these guys, but I was impressed. I was impressed with him. And he's got a little humility about him here. I think this is like a pretty funny quote. I liked it. Like I not only liked it because it was like a funny quote, but I think that it like shows a little side of his personality. And I think this guy's got a good chance to make it. And a guy that, I don't know if he is ever like an all-star or anything like that, but I can see this guy playing in the league for a long time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is true for a lot of guys in the NBA. Like as long as you're not like Ja Morant or, like Russell Westbrook coming into the league, I think most guys probably experience this. You just never hear guys say it like, I'm just a regular dude, especially a number one overall pick.
Exactly.
So, we appreciate the humility. My favorite quote was actually a response to another Joe Mazzulla quote. Joe Mazzulla giving us something every week. He said, quote, "The biggest thing we rob people of from an entertainment standpoint is you can't fight anymore." People talking about the NBA ratings. Joe's got some ideas.
What?
I wish you could bring back fighting. What's more entertaining than a little scuffle? You know what? Honestly, I agree. How come in baseball they're allowed to clear benches? Now, in response to this on Instagram, Steven Adams, thank God Steven Adams is back in our lives.
Totally.
Commented, $20, I punch Rudy Gobert square in the nose. So we're just happy to have Steven Adams back. All he's looking for is $20. That's all he needs in this scenario to punch Rudy in the nose.
I think there probably be more than one offer and probably a lot more than $20 handed over to Steve-O.
So now we move on to our favorite stat this week, and mine is the CP3 effect, which the guy's 40 years old, but it's still happening. If you don't know what the CP3 effect is, it is that when CP3 comes to your team, he dramatically changes the pace at which they play. So I'm just gonna go through his entire career, okay, talking about the teams that he went to, what their pace was the year before he came, and then what their pace was in their first year. So for instance, when he went to the Clippers from New Orleans, they went from the 13th fastest paced team to 27th. The Rockets, when he went there, went from the 3rd fastest to 13th. The Thunder went from the 6th fastest to the 21st. The Suns went from the 9th to the 24th. The Warriors went from the 1st, the fastest team in the league, to the 11th. And now, through 5 games, the Spurs, 3rd fastest team last year, currently 23rd. And I just think this is a really interesting thing to track going forward, because if you look at something like the percentage of their plays that are in transition, last year, very common for like a young team with a bunch of young guys, athletic guys running up and down the court. Mm-hmm. They were second in the percentage of their plays that were in transition, and currently they're 21st. So I'm just really interested to see how that affects someone like Wemby, who obviously had an amazing game against Utah, but before that, it kind of felt like he was getting off to a little bit of a slow start, at least for a lot of people who drafted him number 1 overall in fantasy basketball, but they were rewarded last night. So I'm just interested to watch this CP3 effect and how it affects a young team, because usually when we're thinking about CP3 going to a team, it's usually a veteran team. I mean, all of these other cases were CP3 going to a veteran team. So now he's going to this young rebuilding team, And for a lot of other teams, getting out in transition is always like a big thing for them because it's easy buckets for a lot of these young guys. And so now we have CP3 at the helm. They have not been great in the half court so far, but of course it's only through 5 games. But just something I thought was interesting and want to pay attention to going forward.
My stat of the week was this. I was shocked to see this. These are the bottom 5 teams and opponent field goal percentage in the restricted area. So what teams are shooting at the rim against these particular teams? So not a lot of surprises here. So coming in at number 26, the Utah Jazz. Opponents are shooting 73% at the rim. Seems pretty good.
Makes sense.
Chicago Bulls, 73.4% at the rim.
Also makes sense.
Still tracking the New York Knicks, who are without a lot of bigs. Okay.
Makes sense.
I get it. 29th, the Washington Wizards, 75.8% at the rim. Totally get it. Totally get it.
Valanciunas, we saw it last year with New Orleans.
Yeah. And so now you're thinking, okay, who is the worst team? And I'm going to let you just sit in this for a second, because I don't know that you know the answer, because I didn't know this answer until I saw it on NBA.com, and I had to refresh the page like 13 times because I just didn't believe it's true. The worst teams are shooting 77% in the restricted area against this team. I checked it again this morning. I just had to know. I just had to make sure this was true. Alex, it's the Los Angeles Lakers. Teams are shooting 77% against the Los Angeles Lakers at the rim right now with Anthony Davis. I mean, that blew my mind. Am I crazy? Does that not blow your mind?
I wonder how different it was before the Cavs game, because, obviously they got blown out by the Cavs. I'm sure Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, did well in that game. But that even the effects of one game to be at 77% is still pretty amazing.
Yeah. That blew my mind. So it's early. Most of these stats mean nothing. Whenever people bring up offensive and defensive rating this early, you played only a few teams. You don't have enough of a sample to know who's really that good on defense, who's really this good offensively. It's all unusable numbers for the most part. And so I admit this is probably an unusable number today, but it's certainly something to monitor. Because if the Lakers are going to allow a high percentage at the rim throughout the season, that's going to be a huge weak spot. That's where teams want to go. I was talking to Mark Daignault of the Thunder the other day in a press conference, and we were talking about threes, and he said, we definitely want to take more threes. He said, but we'd rather have a dunk. We'd rather have a layup, right, when it comes down to it. And so if teams are shooting 77%, which is just that's an unheard of percentage for teams. That's a big problem and something to monitor for the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the game by game on cleaning the glass. Phoenix, in their 2 games against the Lakers at the rim, shot 80% and 92.9%. The Kings shot 86.4%. The Cavs game, which I thought maybe that was the reason, 74.3%. So
wow,
wasn't even
down.
Really, I know. They're improving, Andrew.
They're getting better. Listen, It's just getting slowly better. Progress is linear. We all know that. They'll be fine.
Okay, Andrew. Next category, our next favorite thing is our favorite player this week. Andrew, who is your favorite player to watch this week?
I have a couple. One, I just want to give a shout out to Lindy Waters III, who he really just played one great game for the Golden State Warriors and then got the start in the next Pelicans game, which is just kind of funny. They played that little baseball series there, but he had 21 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, and a steal off the bench. He had a nice hammer dunk. He just looked great. He was a plus 26 in that game. He only scored 3 points in the next game, still a plus 13. He's been very helpful to this team. Steve Kerr loves him. Personality wise, I don't know anybody that doesn't love this guy. He played for the Thunder, and I got to know him a little bit. I mean, this is a really nice role player, and I'm glad that he's landed with a team where he can kind of flourish. And I thought from the beginning, the Warriors is a great landing spot for him. It's good for him to show what he can do early on in this season. But I'm going to go with Dennis Schroeder. The the Nets looked like a team through their first couple games. They lost to Atlanta in a close one, and then they got just dismantled by the Orlando Magic. And you thought, okay, this is the road we're heading down with the Nets. And then Dennis Schroeder has ripped off 3 really impressive games since then. They killed the Milwaukee Bucks, who we're going to talk about here shortly. He had 29, 4 and 6 in that game. They played that really close game against Denver, where Schroeder had 28 points, 0 rebounds, but 14 assists. And then they beat the Memphis Grizzlies by 13, in which he had 33 points, 2 boards, and 8 assists. He's been really fun. He looks like FIBA Schroeder out there. It's been great watching him. I'll flip on these games in the fourth quarter, and it's just like Dennis Schroeder time. And I just wonder if, one, are the Nets really going to bottom out here? Are they going to make a decision here? I mean, Schroeder's on a 1-year contract. I think eventually he will get traded to somebody. And trying to find who that is not super easy. I wonder about a team like the Denver Nuggets, who you've already talked about the on-offs there. To have a guy like Dennis Schroeder coming off the bench for them, I think would be huge, just because he is a guy that can come off the bench and give you points consistently, which they just do not have. Now it's about a trade package that makes sense. There are players on the Nuggets that I don't know that you would necessarily want, but I did find one. And it's hard to find a trade just because they're in the second apron and you have to match dollar for dollar.
Yeah.
But I found this trade, and don't judge it until I'm done saying it because this is a tough setup. It's a great setup. Zeke Naji, Jalen Pickett, and Russell Westbrook, and a lottery protected first for Dennis Schroeder.
Wouldn't the lottery protected first be in 31?
It probably would, yes. But, the Nuggets don't have a whole lot to offer here. And matching is really tough. I tried to come up with a more complicated trade that included MPJ, and because the Nets have a lot of guys that I think would be great role players across the NBA, including Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, those kind of guys. And so I tried to make a bigger trade that became way too complicated. It's just tough to trade whenever you're in the second apron in general. But this one worked. I think this obviously would help the Nuggets in a pretty big way.
Yeah, I would turn that down, and the reason is because for a team in the second apron to get off of the Zeke Naji contract, you should have to give up a pick just for that. He has played 2 minutes this year, and if you aren't familiar with the Zeke Naji contract, next year he makes 8.1. The year after he makes 7.5. In 3 seasons, the 27-28 season, he has a player option for $7.5 million. For a low value contract, that is the worst contract in the NBA.
Hey, cap's rising, man. It's going to look better and better as the years go on. Cap's rising. Don't worry, Brooklyn. True. The cap is rising. Just please give us a player that is good, please.
So my favorite player this week came as a result of me watching 2 full Wizards games this week. 2 full. Not just Wizards games, Wizards-Hawks games. Yeah. When was the last time I could say that, much less be willing to admit it? But the times are changing, Andrew, and the Wizards are infinitely more watchable this season than they've been in years past. And one of the major reasons why is my favorite player this week, Bilal Coulibaly. Bilal. He is, listen, I remember during his draft cycle, you and I talked about him a lot because there were some rumors at the time that OKC was interested in him. And back then, my feeling was, okay, I get the defensive upside, makes sense. You could see him coming in day one, being able to play on that end. But I didn't totally get the pitch on offense, and I didn't know if he'd get the time and freedom he'd need to develop those skills. Well, he is getting that freedom right now in Washington and is taking full advantage, and he absolutely pops off the screen. Fans of any team know that feeling when you draft someone and you're like trying to talk yourself into them the whole time, you'll focus on like tiny moments during a game to make you feel better. Like, oh, did you see that cut he made at the beginning of the third? Did you see his cutting? Like, you don't have to squint to see what's awesome about Bilal because it's all right there in front of your face. Like, his athleticism pops. I think he had 2 or 3 putback dunks just in that last Hawks game. He's taking threes confidently with no hesitation. He's terrifying in transition. You know, sometimes there will be guys who have great measurements, but you don't really feel it in the game. You absolutely notice Bilal's 7'2" wingspan. Like, he's jumping into passing lanes. He's coming from behind plays to block Trae Young's shot. The jump we've already seen from last season to this season is incredible, and he's still so young. For comparison, he's about a month younger than Reed Shepherd. Isn't that crazy? It's hard not to watch him in these games and not think that he has star upside, which would obviously be massive for Washington, being in year 2 of the rebuild. And big picture, just think of the questions that we were asking Josh Robbins a couple years ago, like 2 years ago. We were saying things like, so Josh, they really want to build around Bradley Beal? That's really what they want to do?
Yeah.
And now they've got 4 young guys to get excited about. And speaking of Josh Robbins, he published an article on Bilal asking scouts their opinions, so go check that one out. But yeah, I'm all in on Bilal Coulibaly and going out of my way during that early game window, which out here is like 4 p.m. on the West Coast, just to watch Wizards games so I can see him. So shout out to Bilal. And Andrew, that brings us to our favorite team to panic about this week. Yep. I mentioned them earlier. I'm in full-blown panic about the Milwaukee Bucks.
Bro.
As I said, 1-4, 4 straight losses. The offense is bad. The defense is bad. Dame continues to underwhelm as a Buck. Middleton is still out. You know, if you want some positives, Giannis is great. Brook Lopez blocking a lot of shots for an old man. Doing good. You know, hopefully Middleton comes back and he's healthy, but this team feels so stale and so far away from contender status. And I can't help but compare them to Phoenix, who, you know, in this offseason, another older, top-heavy team who really needed to nail every single move around the margins to make it work because of the cap situation. And in the case of Phoenix, they seem to have pulled it off so far. They're at 4-1, getting contributions from Tyus Jones and Mason Plumlee, their free agent signings. But it really feels like the move that is swinging the Suns season is drafting Ryan Dunn, which sounds crazy. But during the Lakers-Suns games, the co-hosts of the Suns podcast, The Timeline, which is a great pod, Sam Cooper and Mike Vigil, they tweeted within seconds of each other that Ryan Dunn had saved the Suns franchise. And that might sound hyperbolic, but I honestly think I agree, because it feels like if you're one of these, Andrew, if you're one of these capped out teams, whether it's like Milwaukee, Denver, even Minnesota, you either have to make a big trade to open up a ton of flexibility, like the Julius Randle deal, or you have to nail a late first round pick. Just adding a couple of random free agents that are probably better in your head than they actually are in real life isn't enough anymore. And the Bucks have absolutely failed on that front. Just this week, they declined the 4th-year option on Marjon Beauchamp. They used the 22nd pick in this past draft on a guy who Sam Vecini said, quote, "I'd take a flyer on him in the top 40 at some point if I had a strong, developmentally conscious organization that I believe would be able to get his frame up to speed within the next 2 years." Is there any franchise you would describe as less developmentally conscious than the Bucks based on their recent draft history? And that's why I'm so down on them right now. Like, there's no hope in the pipeline for this version of the Bucks. This management has proven they are unable to draft and develop talent, even while acknowledging how hard it is to pull it off when you only get late first and seconds. And so the only option is to play this thing out with who they've got. And it's just becoming increasingly clear that that might just not be enough. In the same way, it might not have been enough for the Suns if they had drafted someone else. I mean, I know that sounds crazy because, you know, through like the first couple games, Ryan Dunn was only playing about 15 minutes a game. He ends up playing a lot in the most recent game. But if you take him off of that team, like, I'm just not so sure that we aren't having a similar conversation about the Suns. Now, maybe they're not 1-4, but he has been super important. I mean, the game he played against the Lakers was super important. And this is obviously he's having just the craziest developmental story ever with his 3-point shooting. But everything that draft pundits talked about his defense being ready from day one, that's all been there. And we knew that at the draft. And so credit the Suns for taking him. And getting, whether it's luck or something they've done developmentally to help him suddenly become a good shooter and hit more threes through these couple games than he ever hit at Virginia. That's just been awesome. But on the flip side with the Bucks, it's just, you look at the end of their roster, like, where could we find a spark? Where could we find someone? And there's just nothing there. It's either guys like Marjon Beauchamp, who they kind of just given up on, or guys like who they took in the draft this year, who just feel like they're a couple years away from you even having hope that they could start to contribute. So yeah, I'm freaking out about the Bucks. It could still work out because, and listen, in the offseason, you and I were both into the Bucks. I think we both took their over. And part of it for me was looking at their lineup data from last year. All of their most played lineups were incredible, like legitimately good. Their starting lineup last year was like a plus 13 or something on Cleaning the Glass, really good lineup. And so I just felt like, okay, last year was just a weird year, but they've got enough pieces to make this work. The Middleton thing is huge. And if he comes back and can play, that's great. And maybe they'll start looking normal. I'm not expecting this team to be a lottery team. I'm assuming they will figure it out. A team with Giannis has to figure it out. But man, in terms of their like upside and ceiling, I'm so much lower than I might have been in the preseason.
Yeah, it also shows like what a short-sighted move can do to your franchise, because they had, I mean, their last like decent pick that they had the 17th pick in 2018. They took Dante DiVincenzo. It's a great pick, but they traded him. Do you remember what they got back? There was a 4-team trade in which they got back. They got back Serge Ibaka in the trade, who just never really amounted to a whole lot in Milwaukee. And so they traded him to the Kings. And, you know, Dante's had to bounce around before he's really figured it out. But wouldn't they love to have a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, you know, on their roster right now? Even Sam Merrill, who was the 60th pick for them in 2020, they cut him loose. But, you know, after that, you're right. Like, they took Andre Jackson at 36. He was a guy that everybody knew really couldn't shoot. Marjon Beauchamp, similar story. You know, and the other guys that they're picking are really toward the end of the second round. And then this past year, like you said, you know, AJ Johnson was a strange pick. Everybody talked about it after the draft. Yeah. You know, this is not like recency bias of like trying to watch this guy. It's like, man, they just clearly struggle athletically, and I don't know how they turn this thing around. But we are seeing like a product of like short-sighted moves that don't have any vision beyond, you know, just like a few games, and how that can hurt your franchise. And moving forward.
In their defense, maybe that Andre Jackson pick scared them off of potentially taking Ryan Dunn this past summer. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So Andrew, who's your favorite team to panic about this week?
Man, the New Orleans Pelicans are just in a weird spot. You know, sometimes things are so bad that your pessimism can actually turn into optimism, because you just think there's no way that it can be this bad moving forward. And I kind of feel that way about this Pelicans team. Right now, they're just dealing with a ton of injuries. Trey Murphy's out with a hamstring. DeJounte Murray broke his hand. Daniel Tice with his ankle. CJ McCollum with the abductor. Herb Jones with his shoulder. We just got an update from ESPN saying that Herb Jones will be out for 2 to 4 weeks with a right shoulder strain, a partial tear in his rotator cuff, which is, I mean, that's really bad. And CJ McCollum is out 2 to 3 weeks with that right abductor strain. That's brutal. But what's been even more discouraging to me is just the play of Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson together in the lineup. Like, it's funny because we've known this team to have injury issues, but right now they still have their stars, and they just cannot get it together. You know, they got beat by the Blazers and by the Steph Curry-less Warriors twice. So this was supposed to be a really big season for Zion, with him coming into the season healthy, looking all svelte. But Zion Williamson started the season with literally the worst 4-game stretch of his career in terms of efficiency. He's shooting 36, 25, 61 right now, which is just, I mean, that is, Will Guillory put this on The Athletic, that is actually the worst 4 games of his career.
Wow. And
it's just a really bad way to start. Now, there's news out there about him being like struggling with like an illness. And so like there's definitely like grace for that. But this has just looked really bad. He's not only not efficient, but he's averaging a career high in turnovers right now. I mean, this is a guy, he's shooting 36% from the field. his career average is 58%. I mean, this is a guy that is just a monster at going to the basket, and he has not been that. And I think things will level out if and when they get healthy, but I'm certainly panicked in a crowded West like this. When you start like this and you already have a team that you knew didn't really fit together, having all these injuries, it makes it harder to make trades. It makes it harder to maneuver, in the direction that you want to go with this franchise. And I would be pretty concerned because whoever finishes 11th in the West is going to have a lot of good players and is going to be a team that people looked at before the season and said, this is a good team going into the season. And so I fear for the Pelicans now with the injuries and then just the play of Zion and BI that this is not looking good. And it feels oddly familiar for a New Orleans franchise that has been through this kind of stuff before.
Oh, it's terrible. And the swing from preseason where we're talking about like, oh, maybe Brandon Ingram will take on a lesser role.
I know.
So that you could potentially get a bigger payday down the line. And now it's like they need him so bad because
definitely.
I don't know if I've ever seen a team have this many injuries to major parts of their rotation.
Yeah.
With like DeJounte and Herb and CJ, all these guys, and Trey Murphy,
all
being out for weeks. Mm-hmm. It's not just like a day-to-day thing. So yeah, you definitely feel for Pelicans fans who probably just feel like they're living the same horrible season over and over again.
Yeah, totally.
So to end the week on a happy note, Andrew, let's talk finally about our favorite moment this week. Could be anything. What was your favorite moment this week, Andrew?
This happened on Thursday night. Ja Morant was sitting on his butt on the court with the basketball, looking for somewhere to go with it. And he remained pretty patient until he saw Santi Aldama running toward the rim, and he throws an alley-oop from his butt up to Santi Aldama. He finishes it. Incredible. It was so fun. I suggest you definitely go see it. It made me think about Josh Giddey last year against the Rockets, was sitting in a similar situation, but inside the paint. Ja was actually closer to the 3-point line when he threw this, but Josh Giddey was sitting in the middle of the paint and decided to just shoot the ball from his butt and made it. I thought it reminded me of that. And then I also reminded of Jordan Poole, who he didn't end up really doing much, but I just remember whoever was on the call that night for the Wizards, Jordan Poole is sitting down in a similar position to Ja at the 3-point line, near the 3-point line with the basketball in his hands. And the announcers just start saying, he better not shoot that. Jordan, don't shoot that. They're just so afraid that he was going to try to shoot it from pretty deep range, sitting on his butt on the court. But I love that. I love that moment. I'm so glad Ja Morant is back in the NBA, and the Grizzlies are looking pretty good. They've had some good moments so far.
And my favorite moment was a clip from the Spurs Houston game, which I think there were two of them. But in one of the games, there was a great clip of Wemby trying to box out Steven Adams. And it was just funny because, Wemby's an incredible player. He's so amazing. He's doing things we've never, ever seen. He's 7'6". But even with all of that, at some point in your career, there's going to be someone like Steven Adams who just has something that you have no answer for. And Steven Adams' thing is just girth and strength. And he can just stand in a spot and not be moved on that spot no matter what. And just seeing Wemby trying to push him, it reminded me of being a little kid, being 8 and trying to push your dad and just feeling like you're going into a brick wall every time. You just cannot move them. And it was just a really funny moment seeing him like that. Again, great to have Steven Adams back.
Great to have Steve-O back. Something else that's great to have back is Bryce Simon coming back on the pod. He's talking Detroit Pistons right after this quick break. And we're back after that quick break. Alex, it's time for the Wheel of Fandom, where we spun a digital wheel, and that wheel landed last week on the Detroit Pistons. And the first name that I thought of, in fact, I even said it on the show, was my buddy Bryce Simon, who you can find at Motor City Hoops on Twitter. and he hosts a great Pistons podcast. It's called the Pistons Pulse. I've been on it one time and it was awesome. So it's a great show. And then you probably know him from the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini, who is obviously a great friend of the program. And Bryce has been on this show before talking draft, but now we're talking Pistons. Bryce, welcome to the show.
What's up, guys, man? Thanks for having me. Yeah, things are not great record-wise in Detroit, but the vibes are better, even though they are 1-4. And we're recording this after a win, which was nice. A much-needed win for the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah. So the Pistons are 1-4, as you just said, after facing a pretty difficult early schedule. That record is somehow worse than last year's team, who started off 2-1 before dropping 28 straight. So while the results may not quite be there yet, what are some aspects of the process that you think are significantly improved from last year?
The defense, like, it's crazy. The defense is so much better, and that wasn't the side of the ball that I thought was going to see much improvement. I know JB is kind of known as a defensive coach, but I don't know how many quote unquote good defenders were on this team whenever you looked at it in the preseason. And I will tell two guys that have really made great strides are the young Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. And obviously offensively, a lot of good things from those two as well. But defensively, those two have really locked in. I've kind of made the joke that in just a couple of games, we've seen more weak side rotation X-outs than all of last season from this team. and just some really good possessions overall. So JB's really put his stamp on the defensive end early on in the season.
Are you feeling better about the rotations? Because I know that was a big sticking point last season.
Yeah, like, Jaden Ivey, former number 5 overall pick, is starting, which is always nice to see. I think the stat that really stands out to me, they showed it on the broadcast on Wednesday night. Last season, Cade and or J.I. were only on the court for like 70% of the minutes. And so far this year, it's right under 100%, which essentially means they're either playing together or they're getting staggered, which always seemed like the right play with those two guys, right? You start them together, right, then you stagger J.I. to the second unit, and JB has been able to figure that out and unlock it.
So if that is the glass half full take, what is the glass half empty take? Because they are 1-4. What do you see as this team's major weaknesses right now?
Yeah, so, I mean, they've been competitive. They lost a game to Boston they probably should have won. They lost to Indiana on opening night in a game they probably should have won. So you got to figure out how to win. And it's not just at the end of the game, guys. Like, there's points throughout a game that this team still has to figure out. End of the second quarter, start of the second half, those type of things. I would say the quote unquote disappointing, like Tobias Harris hasn't got off to a great start, even though his gravity is felt on the offensive end and his rebounding. Asar Thompson, second most recent number 5 overall pick. There's so many, it gets confusing, right? When you pick number 5 3 years in a row, you kind of get lost.
It's so weird. It is so bizarre that happened.
It's ridiculous. Still hasn't played because of the blood clots from last year. Yeah. And Jalen Duren, hasn't been the same factor and force that we saw last year, and definitely at the very least, Jalen Duren hasn't taken any strides forward.
Mm-hmm. I was reading some Pistons fan comments, and it seems like a lot of fans see a need for a backup point guard. Do you share that feeling?
So I think where I differ from a lot of fans is they need like a third point guard who's comfortable not playing on nights whenever J.I. is under control and can handle the second unit, but then can come in and calm things down whenever he doesn't. Or the big worry, guys, is, I mean, Cade and J.I. aren't going to play 82 games this year. So what happens? Who plays the backup point guard whenever those guys aren't both available? So I think that's where a lot of the veteran point guard conversation comes from.
Is there a name? Not like, yeah, we should go get this guy, but just like the idea of a guy that would make sense in that role?
Yeah, Monte Morris, the guy they signed last year,
Okay,
who only
all
played
right,
7 games, and then they traded. Monty was hurt, and then, but just a guy that can still space. Tyus Jones would have been like the perfect name, right? But like that's way over their, ability. Like people bring up Markelle Fultz and Dennis Smith Jr. I just don't think those guys are the right type of guys. Because if you do bring them in and want to play in minutes, they need to be able to really space the floor, and neither of those guys do that. Along, with the things they do well. And I'm also like, do Fultz and Dennis Smith Jr. want to sign up for a Pistons team when they know they're going to play third fiddle, being a creator behind Cade and J.I. So,
yeah, that makes sense. So one of the big changes out of the gate this season is Jaden Ivey being a key part of the rotation and not playing behind Killian Hayes.
You said it, not me. Who's not in the NBA. Killian Hayes, who's not in the NBA. Killian Hayes is not currently in the NBA. And listen, I like Killian, but it was crazy.
It was so strange.
I didn't try to punt him to the moon like Tim Bontemps, but I just want to emphasize he's not in the NBA right now.
Yep. For good reason. So Ivy is averaging 21, 4, and 4 while shooting 43% from 3 on over 5.5 attempts a game. So what are the early impressions of Ivy's play and how he might fit long-term with Cade?
I've always thought that they could play together, guys. And I feel like I've been in the minority there, but I thought J.I. was a little bit of an off-the-ball player. I didn't think he was primarily an on-ball guy. I think he's a stagger into the second unit and let him run the second unit against other teams' second unit on-ball guy, but not as a starter. J.I. has turned himself into a good offensive rebounder. Here's why it looks really good right now. If I want to be fair, is he's knocking down catch and shoot threes. As you mentioned, the 3-point percentage, but he can cut off the ball. He can come off zoom actions and staggers and those type of things. I think he fits perfectly fine. And here's where it helps too. When you have gravity like Tim Hardaway Jr., even Tobias Harris, even though he's not shooting it well right now, Malik Beasley, having those guys as, third and fourth options offensively help with the overall spacing of the team as well.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as Cade and Ivy go, give me the vision for what this looks like in a couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing it right now. And again, I know it hasn't always turned into wins, but guys, both of those guys are playing really well on both ends of the court. And that's what they're not 1-4 because of Cade and J.I.'s play. Now, if you want to critique anything, the turnovers have been pretty bad from Cade. They're over 5 per game right now, and he's had a couple really bad ones. But it's because right now Tobias Harris is shooting 15% from 3 and averaging 12 points a game. And because Asar Thompson isn't in the lineup and Ron Holland's playing 13 minutes a night and, really isn't ready offensively. Fontecchio hasn't found his game. Duran isn't playing his best. I think what we're seeing right now, where these guys are on the floor for almost 100% of the time, either together or one of, is exactly the vision this organization should have for those two. Well, and I want to point this out real quick. J.I. is taking the primary defensive matchups. He guarded Donovan Mitchell. He guarded Tyrese Maxey. He guarded Tyrese Halliburton while he's doing these things on the offensive end.
So I want to ask you about a player whose role has significantly changed, Isaiah Stewart. Because last season, according to Basketball Reference, he played 76% of his minutes at the 4, whereas through the first 5 games this season, Beef Stew, 100% of his minutes at backup center. He has also only taken 1 3 this season, whereas last year he attempted 3.8 per game. He shot 38%. What do you think about him being deployed exclusively as a backup center and the apparent de-emphasis on his 3-point shot?
All for the move to permanent 5-man. I think this is what Isaiah Stewart's ultimate role in the NBA is as a backup 5 who can moonlight at a 4 if you take on certain matchups. Say, what we used to see from the Minnesota Timberwolves, or if you're taking on the Nuggets and you feel like you need to put somebody on Jokic and have another bigger guy off the ball, whatever. But I think it should be like an 80-20 split in the second unit. I do not like the 3-point usage going the way it's going. I do not understand. I'm not sure why. JB recently had a quote from my co-host Amari Sankofa II, who's the beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, and JB kind of took the quote-unquote blame for that, saying they had really emphasized Isaiah rolling to the rim, and he is a really good offensive rebounder. If you see the offensive rebounding numbers, they're awesome for his minutes per game, but really that's not his game. He's not a rim gravity guy. I do think Stu needs to be able to space the floor, pick and pop, trail threes, corner threes, stuff like that. So I'm hoping he's able to figure that part out, even though I do like seeing the majority of his minutes at the 5 off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the season's going for the Pistons? Like, if you were to like crystal ball, like what happens at the end of 82 games for this Detroit Pistons team?
Yeah, I'm trying not to be like overly optimistic about 1-4 start, but it has truly been competitive, guys. This team had the Celtics down 6 with 2 minutes to go. Yeah. And if it weren't for Drew Holiday actually banging back-to-back threes and then a great defensive play, they probably beat the Celtics.
Yeah.
And so it really has looked better. I think they're top 20 in both offense and defense, which I know most listeners are like, come on, dude, like top 20. But whenever you've lived in the realm that I've lived in watching this team.
Dude, top 20 is hilarious thing to say about your team. Like, listen, on a positive note, top 20 out of how many teams? Doesn't matter. Don't worry about how many teams it is total.
Listen, when you've lived it, listen, guys, I came in 2020. I'm not a lifelong Pistons fan, as we will find out whenever I get crushed at trivia a little bit later. I came in 2020 when they decided to waive Blake, trade Derrick Rose, buy into Sekou Doumbouya, and the start of Killian Hayes.
Yeah.
That's all I've ever covered. That's all I've ever talked about on my podcast. That's all the film breakdowns I've ever got to do. So seeing a top 20 defense and a borderline top 20 offense at the same time is amazing for me. I'm not a spoiled Oklahoma City Thunder fan who has a top 3 offense and defense and all the draft picks and all the best young players in the league. It is, I don't know if I can cuss or not, but it is BS.
Hey, we had to watch Poku for a few seasons, okay? It wasn't all great.
God forbid you watch this interesting 7-footer with a crazy skill set that plays on the wing.
And creates his own fanny packs with a local company. I mean, come on.
It is kind of crazy, though. I'm on Cleaning the Glass, and they are 17th, which in defense, which is kind of impressive when you think about the guys they added, like Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley. Like, none of these guys are thought of as like really good defensive players. And last year they were 25th in defense, according to Clean the Glass. So that is pretty impressive, that even just making that jump through this early part of the season against a really tough schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I said about the JB hiring, some people questioned it, like, oh, he couldn't get teams over the hump. And I'm like, who cares? You know how far away this team is from getting over the hump in the playoffs? Yeah. If JB gets this team to the point where we're questioning his ability to get them through the second round of the playoffs, he did his job. Like, build the statue, hopefully better than Dwayne Wade's, and then fire him and hire the coach that does get them over the hump. Because, like, that's what this team needs. They need to go from almost unwatchable and non-competitive to what we've seen through 5 games. I'm just terrified that I'm getting excited about it after 5 games, and we're not going to see it for, I mean, it's not going to be 82 games, right? Like, every team has their nights. But if they can do this for 75, 80% of their games this year, this is a real step forward, because it's on the back of the 2 guys that I think matter the most in Cade and J.I.
Yeah. I hope this is right. I hope that this is feels like a normal season, because I sat down with James Edwards after the 2-1 start.
Hey, about James. James Edwards just cuts bait and goes and covers the second best team in the East. Like, I love James, but come on, man. Like, fight through it with the rest of us.
A direct quote from James as I'm sitting and eating dinner with him in Oklahoma City right before Thunder Pistons, which I think was the first loss of that streak, of the 28 loss streak. He said, I know what a bad team looks like, and this is not a bad team. And then they lost 28 straight games. So I really hope, it's just like, it kind of feels like enough is enough. Like, okay, come on, like, let's get it together.
Bryce, do you remember how long it took you last year to like give up hope? Because that 2-1 start, I even came on Slam and Jam and I was like, oh, I think the Pistons might have found a defensive identity.
You did.
Like,
That's true.
I said that. So
Yeah.
how long into that losing streak did it take for you to like, oh my gosh, this is
Okay,
done.
so here's the thing is here's why I think I do a decent job covering the team is I don't have a lot of fandom. The only team that I'm fanatic about are the Kansas City Chiefs in football. Like that's it. Like I'm a fanatic. I live, breathe, die like by them winning and losing. It ruins my night when they lose. With the Pistons, it's not as much. But here's the thing for your listeners who don't know, my real job is as a teacher. My students don't understand that concept. So do you know what it's like going to school every day, teaching 12, 13, 14-year-olds, and the team that you podcast about is on a 20-game losing streak and a 22-game losing streak and a 26-game losing streak? And mind you, these kids know nothing about basketball, actually. God love them. But they just come in and they just talk trash to you. And what am I supposed to say? Like, the team I cover sucks and there's nothing I can do about it.
Well, Bryce, we appreciate you answering all of our questions about the Detroit Pistons. We are very hopeful for their season. It is now time to play, though. Andrew versus the Beat.
Andrew, I want to remind you, you came on Game Theory.
Yeah.
And I rigged the game for you to win. Do you remember that? How I helped you win?
That was so kind. You did? I didn't know you did that.
I just want to remind you before we start this game.
Interesting. Okay, so Andrew versus the Beat. Andrew goes head-to-head against Beat Writer. In this case, we are talking to Bryce Simon. You can find him on Pistons Pulse. You can find him Game Theory at Motor City Hoops on Twitter. Okay, Bryce, how this works, 8 questions, all related to the Pistons. Some are easy, some are hard, and I say this every week, but this week I really mean it. There are some easy ones this week, I feel it. Yeah, it was hard for me to come up with super hard ones. So you're going to give me a number between 1 and 8. It will correspond to a question. If you get it right, you'll get at least 2 points. If you get it wrong, Andrew will have a chance to steal for 1, and we'll go back and forth till all the questions have been asked and answered. So what number would you like to start with, Bryce?
Honestly, I was hoping you'd say they were all ridiculously hard. So everybody's like, oh, I didn't know that. Why would Bryce know that?
That's true. It's almost worse to say, oh, these are all easy, and then we're going to both get them all wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Lucky number 3. Let's see if I can start off with a correct
Okay,
one.
here we go. Lucky number 3. The Pistons only have 3 players with more than 5 years of NBA experience. There are only 2 other teams in the league who have fewer players with with more than 5 years of experience. Name them both, and you get 1 point per correct answer. So these teams,
you said two other teams.
Yeah, 2 other teams. So these teams,
the Wizards.
That is incorrect, Bryce.
Oh.
You came out really hot, though.
Well, they just started like the youngest lineup in their franchise's history, so they must have.
They did. So I mean, they have Valanciunas.
Yeah,
that would be one. They have Rashawn Holmes, Malcolm Brogdon. See, you got screwed by people who aren't even playing.
Guys that aren't playing. Yeah,
Kuzma.
Okay. I just went young guys. Okay. Yeah. All right. My
Good
bad.
guess, though. I mean, if we were talking about guys who are actually playing, probably would have been correct. Yeah. Andrew.
What's the stat again?
So they have to have fewer than 3 players who have had more than 5 years of NBA experience.
Fewer than 3 players.
And there's 2 teams.
What about Charlotte?
Charlotte, Andrew? That is correct. They have 2. Can you name the other one?
2 with 5 or more. 2 with 5 or more?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Shoot. I don't know if I know the other one.
You're welcome to take a guess, Andrew. Just throw out any team.
I know.
I would say don't go with the Bucks. Don't choose the Bucks.
Don't choose the Bucks.
The Sixers. Don't choose the Sixers.
Oh my gosh!
the
Yeah, when I went to
Lakers.
the Sixers roster and sorted, there were so many double digits.
I know this isn't right because I know three that aren't, but I'll just say San Antonio for time's sake. But I think they have three guys that are at least three.
Andrew, that is correct. You got it right. Congratulations. So they have, they do have, sorry, they just have to have three or fewer. Sorry, I might have not said that correctly, but it's Zach Collins, Harrison Barnes, and Chris Paul. And Chris Paul.
Yeah. Just saw him last night.
The Sixers have five guys with double-digit years of experience coming into this year. That's really impressive. Okay, wow. Andrew, you have 2 points, and you have control of the board. What number?
Number one.
Question number one. The worst start to a season in Pistons history was 2012, when the Pistons lost their first 8 games in a row. Similar to recent Pistons teams, spacing was an issue for that team as they took the 6th fewest threes per game. Who were the top 2 on the 2012-2013 Pistons team in total three-pointers made? You get 1 point per correct answer. So 2012-2013 Pistons. Most three-pointers made, total three-pointers.
Oh my gosh.
Top 2.
What about Kyle Singler?
Oh, Andrew, so close. He was number 3, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the top 2. So, Bryce, you have a chance to steal. You can give me the top 2.
So,
three-pointers made.
The first name that came to mind was actually Charlie Villanueva.
Bryce, that is correct. He was number 2. Can you name who had the most threes for the 2012-2013 Pistons?
Dang.
Charlie V. What a free agent class that was.
What a free agent.
Ben Gordon, Charlie Villanueva.
Ben Gordon.
Was Josh Smith in a different free agent class?
I think he was. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that was the same one.
That would have been too much.
I don't think this is the right year.
That would have been too much.
Brandon Jennings.
Oh my gosh, you had the first name right. It is Brandon Knight.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh,
so
Brandon
close.
Knight.
Remember when Zach Lowe, he wrote an article, he almost picked Brandon Knight to be an all-star? Wasn't that cool? He was I mean, like, Brandon Knight was good. Sometimes you forget. He was good. Okay, Bryce, you're on the board. It's 2-1, and you have control of the board.
So, it's funny. I've always wondered how you guys kept track of the numbers that have been selected so well, and now card. I see the little trick behind the scene. I love it. Number 8.
Okay, this is a good one. Hooper is the name of the Pistons mascot.
Jeez.
He is a horse, which is a reference to the horsepower in a car. What bodily function can a horse not do? So I'm going to name you 5 bodily functions. One of them a horse is not able to do, okay? So here we go. Sweat, vomit, sneeze, cry, or cough. Once again, that is sweat, vomit. Bryce, I have terrible news. Horses can sweat. They do it to cool themselves down, similar to humans.
Makes sense.
Andrew, so the you get to guess the other possible answers: vomit, sneeze, cry, or cough.
I'll say cough. I don't know. No, not cough. Not cough. Cry. I don't know.
That's really cool. That when you changed the answer, I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to get the right one. But you got both of them wrong. You picked 2 wrong ones. Horses cannot vomit.
Really?
They can't do it. Yeah. I remember we had a question a while back about rodents, because no rodent can vomit either. And I learned in researching Hooper that horses can't vomit as well. All right, Andrew, the board is yours.
You really could have went easier. You could have just asked me the name of the Pistons mascot, and I still would have missed that. Like, I wouldn't even.
Would you? Oh, really? Would you have known the Pistons' former mascot before Hooper?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't know that you started following in 2020 because I really wanted to use that as a question, but I was like, oh, he's a Pistons fan. He's going to know it for sure.
No, like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have got Hooper.
Okay. Yeah. Hooper, because it was Sir Slam-A-Lot. And I just really wanted to hear that name on the podcast.
Sir Slam-A-Lot.
Sir Slam-A-Lot. Okay,
Sir
Andrew,
Slam-A-Lot.
the board is yours.
Number 2.
Question number 2. Spacing was obviously a big point of emphasis in the Pistons' offseason plans. Which active NBA player has hit the most three-pointers as a member of the Pistons? So this is a player, he can be on the current Pistons roster. He could be a player on another team who once played for the Pistons. But when they were on the Pistons, they hit the most amount of threes of anyone who currently has ever played on the Pistons in their career.
So it has to be threes made while they were on the Pistons.
Correct. Threes made while a Piston. Currently active on a roster somewhere.
Oh. God, I don't know. Luke Kennard?
Luke Kennard, that's a great guess, Andrew. It's not right, but it was a great guess. Bryce, you have a chance to steal.
What about KCP?
A really good guess because he missed out by 2 3-pointers.
Shut
to the
up.
correct answer, which this was going to be really hard, but it's Sadiq Bey, who is on a roster technically. He is not currently playing because he is injured, but he is on the Wizards, so it does count. All right, Bryce, it is still 2-1. He had a lot of threes. Isn't that kind of impressive?
Well, his rookie season was...
KCP?
So his rookie season, he would have set the rookie record if it would have been an 82-game season. I'm pretty sure. Like if you look at what he was making per game, if you take it out over 82 games, but it was that first year after the COVID year, so it was 72 or how many ever they played.
Wow.
He had a 50-point game too, right?
Against the Orlando Magic. Yep. Yep. Sadiq.
Okay. Bryce, the board is yours. You're only down by 1.
4.
Question number 4. Tobias Harris was brought to Detroit in part for his shooting. And while he's currently shooting 3 of 20 from 3, better days are surely ahead. What is the most amount of three-pointers Tobias has ever made as a Piston? Now, you get to choose who answers first, okay? So you can make Andrew answer first, and then you can go higher or lower. Or you can answer first, and then Andrew would go higher or lower. However, if you make Andrew answer and he gets it exactly correct, he would get a bonus point. So this is the most amount of threes Tobias has ever made as a Piston in a game.
I will let Andrew guess.
All right, Andrew. If you get it exactly correct, you'd get a nice little bonus point.
6.
All right, so Andrew has set the bar at 6. Bryce, would you like to go higher or lower than 6?
That's a really good bar, Andrew.
Thank you.
Because if it was 5, I definitely would have went over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go over still. Over.
Andrew, you were within 1 of the correct answer.
God, I think I did this last week too, where I was within 1 of whatever it was.
And you got it wrong last week, but this week you also got it wrong because it is 7. So Bryce gets the points. Look at that. And Bryce pulls ahead. He's now up 3-2. 3 questions left, Andrew.
5.
Question number 5. In honor of the Pistons theoretically getting more shooters, let's name the top 10 in franchise history for total made threes. So how this works, Andrew will give me a name, then Bryce will give me a name. We'll go back and forth till one of you stumbles. So franchise history, total made threes as a Piston.
Franchise. Okay. Chauncey Billups.
Chauncey Billups, number 2. Over to Bryce.
Joe Dumars.
Joe Dumars, number 1.
Joe Dumars.
Back to Andrew.
I mean, Sadiq Bey has to be on this list, right?
He is on this list. Would you have known that, Andrew, if we hadn't had that question first? He's number 7.
He would not have been on the forefront of my mind.
Okay,
no.
Okay. All right. Back to Bryce.
So that means Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is also on this list.
A great guess. He's number 8, right behind Sadiq Bey. Back to Andrew.
This guy didn't shoot a lot of threes, but he just played for the Pistons for so long on the wing. Rip Hamilton.
Whew. Andrew coming in at number 10. Rip Hamilton. That is correct. Over to Bryce.
Sheed.
Rasheed Wallace, number 4 on the list. Back to Andrew. Ooh, Andrew, it's getting dicey for you.
I only have one more that I think might be on the list. I have 2 more.
What about Tayshaun Prince?
That's one of them.
Tayshaun Prince, Andrew, number 5.
Tayshaun.
All right, Bryce, what was your other name?
So I just know this guy got a ton of buckets for the Pistons. I don't know if there was enough threes, though. Jerry Stackhouse.
Jerry Stackhouse, he was not on the list, which means Andrew gets the points. The other names, number 3, Lindsey Hunter. 3rd all-time.
Lindsey Hunter.
A lot of seasons.
3rd.
Yeah.
3rd all-time.
Wow.
Number 6 all-time, Terry Mills. You guys big Terry Mills fans?
Not a huge Mills guy over here.
First time hearing that name in my life. Okay,
is Reggie Jackson on this list?
Reggie Jackson was number 9, Andrew.
Okay.
Great job.
Nice.
Okay, 2 questions left. Bryce, you're now down by 1. 6 or 7?
7.
7. Through his first 133 games, Jalen Duren has already had 65 double-doubles. Actually, that's not true. Well, yes, it is true, but that's not the question I meant to ask. I'm realizing I looked up the wrong stat. I actually meant to say the amount of games he had with double-digit rebounds, which is actually like 74 or something. Okay, so we're talking about double-digit rebounds. Okay. There are only 3 active NBA players who had more double-digit rebound games through their first 133 games. How many can you name? You get 1 point per correct answer. So these are currently active players who through their first 133 games had more double-digit rebound games than Jalen Duren. And there's only 3 of them. So we're thinking like 75 or more of these games.
So Andre Drummond?
Andre Drummond is incorrect. Huh. Andrew, you have a chance to steal.
Yo, that was going to be my guess too. Was Andre Drummond.
It sounds so right. I might.
Well, that
look
makes
it
me
up.
feel better than because I was like, I feel like this is the obvious one for me to say. So,
yeah, that sounds very right.
How is that wrong? Let's look it up, Alex. Maybe I messed up.
Yeah, that's. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. So active players that had double-digit rebound games.
Correct.
Okay. Oh man, who's getting bounds?
I'm doing my stat head search right now.
What about Vooch?
Oh, I remember now. Okay. No, that is incorrect.
Drummond didn't play that much his rookie year.
So Drummond actually had the exact same amount of double-digit rebound games as Jalen Duren.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. That makes me feel
so that was a very good guess. And Andrew Vucevic, he was number 7. He had 64. Okay. The top 3 names.
So like is Sabonis one?
No, because he played in Oklahoma City and he didn't do anything.
Yeah, he was stretch 4 for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, he's actually really far down. Any other guesses though for fun? Just for fun? One player had 95 of his first 133 games, double-digit rebounds.
Whoa.
And that player was Karl Anthony Towns.
Oh.
And the other 2 guys were DeAndre Ayton
and
Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid.
Oh, God. It feels like cheating. Embiid feels like cheating.
I thought you might go back to the DeAndre Jordan well. But he didn't get a ton of minutes.
Crossed my mind. It crossed my mind, but I know that he was a 3rd-string center for the Clippers for a long time.
So very smart.
Yeah.
Even Rudy Rudy had 44. Okay, Andrew, this is the final question. You get it right, you win the week. You get it wrong, Bryce will have a chance to steal and tie the game, sending it into overtime.
Oh, boy.
Cade Cunningham has scored 2,886 points through 143 career games. Which active former number 1 overall pick scored the most points through their first 143 games with 3,583? So this is an active player, former number 1 overall pick, most points scored total through their first 143 games.
Active player, former
Active
number 1
player.
overall pick.
That is right.
Okay. Okay. Is it just LeBron James? Is that dumb?
It is dumb. I mean, it sounds obvious. It sounds like it should be right, but it's not right. Bryce, you have a chance to steal. And
That's wild.
So my first thought was actually Kyrie.
Kyrie Irving. That is also incorrect, which means Andrew wins the week. The correct answer. Any other guesses?
Anthony Davis.
No.
Derrick Rose?
No. Not active.
Oh, shit.
Zion? I don't know.
It's
Who?
Zion. Zion
Oh,
Williamson.
really?
Most points through 143
Shoot,
games.
he was like, I mean, I thought about him, but he's had such a strange
I
career.
know.
It's been so choppy. It's been so choppy.
But when he's played, he's been
Yeah,
really
but
good.
when he's played.
Because it was just the games he's actually played. So the games he
Right,
missed
right.
don't matter.
They don't count. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got you.
That was a good game.
Interesting.
4-3.
Wow.
Congrats, Andrew.
What a game. Hey, go listen to the Pistons Pulse podcast. I love listening to your shows. I even listen to your off-season shows. I just like listening to you guys. So please go check that out. And then, of course, check out the Game Theory podcast with our guy Sam Vecini and Bryce. It's a great show. If you are just like a person, and if you're listening to this, of course, you just love basketball. But if you just love basketball, it's like another one that should be heavy in your rotation. So please go check that out. Bryce, thanks so much for coming on.
No, thanks, guys. I had a blast. Always down to join anytime you get the Pistons on the wheel again, or NBA draft or whatever. So thanks for having me, and I'm glad I didn't embarrass myself too much in trivia. This is two times I haven't acted too much of a fool. So thanks, guys.
All right, folks, that was Pistons Week. Detroit Pistons, the first team on Wheel of Fandom of this season of Slam and Jam. Wheel of Fandom, where each week we spin a digital wheel, it lands on a team. We become fans of that team for the next week. And this week, who is the Wheel of Fandom team going to be? Well, let's spin the wheel and see who it's going to be. This week's Wheel of Fandom team will be the Los Angeles Lakers.
The
Lakers. Let's see who the Lakers are playing. Let's see who the Lakers are playing next week.
Lakers. Wow. They've been
looking
a
pretty
mixed
good.
bag. Mixed bag, the Lakers. I'm excited.
I mean,
excited.
yeah, they got blown out by Cleveland, but Cleveland's undefeated.
Yeah.
That game against Phoenix, at Phoenix, that was a great game.
It was a great game.
Oh my gosh. Listen to they were playing. At Toronto, Scotty Barnes is out. Okay,
Yeah.
Great. That's Friday. At Detroit on Monday.
Oh.
right.
Our Pistons.
Our Pistons. At Memphis on Wednesday. Okay. That's a somewhat juicy
That's a good
matchup.
one. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Memphis played great this week. Yeah.
So there we go. 3 road games. Toronto, Detroit, Memphis. They're on a 5-game road trip right now.
Okay.
So we'll see how the Lakers do.
Wow. We'll also see how our listeners do with 5-star reviews. If you will leave us a 5-star review, we will read it on the podcast. So this review comes from WB's Rec. Slam Jam, 5 stars. A year ago, I wrote a review of this and then stopped listening for some reason. Glad to see it's back and better than ever. the best Saturday NBA podcast out there. Of course, it is only Saturday NBA it's the only Saturday NBA podcast out there, but still, unlike many, there is a remembrance that sports is supposed to be fun and that it is okay to laugh and usually informative. I listen every week. Thank you so much for that review. This next one comes from Schwaze in the United States. Says, a real basketball podcast. Sounds obvious enough, right? Well, here's the thing. If you expect to skip the first 10-ish minutes of a basketball pod because one of the hosts is giving you updates on their kid's AAU team or his house or his back pain, this is not the program for you. Or if you want the host to suddenly pivot to talking about football on a basketball pod, again, don't bother with this one. And if you want the host's personalities to grate on your nerves as you wait for them to finally make some salient points, you get the picture. This pod is pure hoops every day, and it's awesome. Every episode is packed with opinions and updates, perspectives. The hosts are simultaneously approachable and wildly knowledgeable. Thank you for putting this together. It's clearly a labor of love for the game and the fans who can't get enough of real basketball talk. Thank you so much for that review. If you will leave us a 5-star review, again, we'll read it on the podcast.
Sounds like really that last person listens to some podcasts they hate, Andrew.
Listen, it doesn't seem to be going too well on the other podcasting.
That was
front.
really specific. Imagine if you're an NBA podcaster out there with some back pain, you're like, oh my gosh, is he talking about me?
Listen, Schwaze is not holding back on the other basketball pods that they're listening to. Please do leave us a 5-star review and we'll read it on the podcast. Would very much appreciate that. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend and the basketball, and we will talk to you guys again next week.